They're starting up now. Okay, we're pretty much live, so I'm just going to roll out the first thing. We've got a few more seconds before I do that, and then when your pictures come up, we're going.
Hi everyone, thank you so much for joining tonight to listen to this online lecture with Conscious Isolation and the University of East London. Tonight we have Wayne Chisnall speaking about his practice. Wayne, thank you so much for giving a talk to us tonight. I'm really excited to hear all about your recent projects, and whenever you're ready, over to you.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me. So I'll just I'll click onto my PowerPoint now, if that's okay. Okay, we ready to start?
Yeah,
we're good. We can see that.
Excellent, brilliant. I've been making art pretty much most of my life. So I think for this talk, I'm going to go through some of the sort of motifs and themes that have emerged, but I'm mostly going to centre on the sculpture side of what I've done. But I will touch on other areas as we go through. So what I'll start with, which is very different to what I do now, although I do still do a little bit of illustration. I first got into sort of professionally, I suppose, art in the late 80s after I left sixth form college. I got into illustration by accident. I was just looking for a summer job at a local, manufacturing factory, and there was a Japanese one called Ricoh, and so I just thought I'd do a few months labour work there while I was finding something proper to do. And it was one of those things because I'd been to college, they just stuck me in the office, but I didn't really have a job. And what happened was a new line of photocopies were coming in, and so we were given all the manuals. We had to sort of get the Japanese to translate into English, and then we were supposed to paste them together and release them to the line workers. But I noticed that the drawings were so bad that I just started redrawing some of them, and some of the line supervisors cottoned on to what I was doing, and they all wanted theirs redrawing as well. So that became my department. My job was I became a technical illustrator for illustrating assembly manuals on how to build photocopiers. And it became so big that the whole department grew around me. And so I spent 4 years as a technical illustrator, honing my skills. And around at the same time, I started working for a few role-play magazines, it was a really good way of me sort of trying out different styles, different illustration techniques. So illustration is my sort of background, but when I sort of went off to university, I think I went to the fine art BA, and between leaving the illustration work behind, I'd done various courses, and I really got into printmaking. I did a part-time degree at Bourneville, and that's where I got into printmaking. So when I went off to did my second BA in fine art in Northampton, I thought I was going to be a printmaker, and up until the second year, that's what I was. But it's just a lot of, I think some of my better work tends to have happened just through silly ideas or thoughts. And this one here, you see, and when I'm a man, I'll think of a man. It's basically, I was out drinking with some fellow students one night and got drunk, and we were talking about what we were interested in doing. And I said that we were talking about toys and stuff from our childhood. I got onto we were talking about Airfix kits. I said, oh, yeah, it'd be great fun to make a life-size one of me as an Airfix kit. And, you know, sobered up, went to the sculpture department and said what I wanted to do. And you know, from then on, I was sort of, you know, I was a sculptor, I suppose. It's really, although at the time I still thought of myself as a printmaker, because I was still, when we had to come for our final, make our final selection of what area we're into, I still put down printmaking, because in my head, even though I was working on this large sculpture, I was still thinking as a printmaker, until my my sculpture tutor came up to me and said, what the hell are you doing? You're a sculptor now. So I was like, yeah, okay, I suppose I am. So this is a piece I made in the second year of my BA. And I also at the same time, I made baby kit. And I was really interested in playing with the whole idea of a model kit, that, you know, the whole idea that all the parts are meant to make a coherent whole. But I noticed, so I wanted to do one where it didn't do that, but initially it looked like it would. And I chose baby, the dolls, because I sort of noticed by collecting different doll parts that some dolls seem to be, they'd have proportions from different age groups. So there's some that have almost like a pubescent body, but then, you know, childlike head, and the limbs didn't quite match. But around this time, a lot of coincidence and sort of luck and serendipity seemed to be coming into my work, the way I was finding my materials. And this piece was the best, you know, the best example of that. I was basically I'd done a life-size, you know, drawing in charcoal of this piece I wanted to make, but to complete it, I realised I was missing the larger doll piece. And I just, you know, couldn't find it anywhere, you know, going to car boots and charity shops and whatever. But then one day I was walking back from college, and I had this weird feeling just to take a different route home. And as I did so, I was thinking about this baby kit, and I got parked down the road, and there was a black bin bag at the side of the road next to a telegraph pole. And there was a leg sticking out of it, so I ran over, ripped open the bag, and pulled out the doll of the exact size I needed. So, yeah, this is my serendipity, you know, coincidence story. This is also another piece from my final year of my BA. I did a whole series of tower block pieces on wheels. There was 4 in the series, and they were all to do with, I was quite interested in possessions and how they are attachment to physical objects, and our urge to collect and to own and to possess, and the whole idea that, you know, we as a species we restrict our own mobility just through the fact that we tie ourselves down by possessions and houses and cars, and so I wanted to make a series that reflected this. This one was originally called Toy Tower, but whenever I exhibited it, children would just grab hold of it and pull bits off, and so I renamed it Magnet. Because it just, whenever it was in a show, you could just see the kids' eyes widen and they'd run towards it. In fact, the first time I ever exhibited it, I went after the private view on the opening day. I went in, and the guy who was invigilating said, "Oh, I was looking over, and suddenly it had gone." And he looked out, and 4 little lads were wheeling it down the road. So he managed to get it back, but also. So this is one of 4 in the series, but even though I made it a long time ago, this is made in the 90s, I tend to keep hold of a lot of my work and just put it in storage. Then I had more work to exhibit. But it's just been bought by, I was contacted by the Saudi Minister of Culture, because there's a new museum opening up next year, the Black Gold Museum in Riyadh, and it's all to do with oil, so anything made of oil, plastics and stuff. And so they've just acquired it for their collection. So it pays to hang on to your stuff, old pieces. Two other pieces in the show, in that series, because I say it was all to do with our attitudes towards possession. I was getting very into materials and the values that we place on them. So the one you see on the right, made of old books. So I was very interested in the whole collectability of books and old editions and leather bound and how they're quite precious, and even a whole thing about like sacred books like Bibles, and they're very revered. And in making this, I had to cut them all up into sections and interlock them. And so I was quite fascinated by the how people were quite horrified that I was doing this to old books. But that was the whole point. It was all to do with like, it's just a material. But the one on the left, Fetish, is made of human hair. And that came about because somebody commented that my love of materials, it was almost the same intensity that a fetishist would have for whatever it is they fetishize. So I wanted to make a piece that sort of symbolized fetish, but I didn't want to go for the sort of cliched leather or rubber or whatever. So I was looking into different fetishes, and I found it was a hair fetish. So that's why hair. But the fourth piece in the series, it was all to do with this one went a little bit out of control. It refused to obey the strict, sort of form of the others. And this one was influenced by. I was more influenced by animation in this. I'm a very big fan of like animators like the brothers Quay and Jan Svankmajer. So actually, this is the first in the series, because I originally I was thinking about going to animation, so I was going to build a set, but then I turned it inside out into a tower, and then this was the one that that's where the tower series idea came from. But this one was all made up of just bits of rubbish, so old boxes, old bits of furniture and skirting boards and old lenses, and all the little pieces inside just made from bits of rubbish that I found, but I constructed in such a way that they were meant to convey. It's called the city because it's meant to convey like each compartment is almost like a neighbour. There's an internal narrative in each box, but they're all oblivious of their neighbour. So the whole idea, it's kind of like mobile cabinet of curiosities. And this is the piece that then has probably influenced my later work. I moved away mostly from the bright plasticky pieces, and I really got this love of old found objects and materials and the patina and the history that goes with it, and how you can play with materials that people are already sort of familiar with, so you're kind of like playing with their expectations in a way. Unfortunately, this one I went to a show in a few years ago in Birmingham, and it appeared on the BBC Culture Show, but when the curator returned it, it was smashed to pieces. So I was very annoyed at that. So this one, it's still in pieces, and I do plan to rebuild it, make it even bigger at some point. But as I said, it's the piece that kind of influenced my other pieces, my other work. And since then, when I moved to London after I graduated, and like with many artists, trying to find an affordable studio was hard. So I ended up living in warehouses and old shop fronts. So I sort of live workspace, but you had very limited space. So a lot of my work became quite small boxes. And you can see here the lens on the right, the lens element is still sort of prevalent in a lot of work. But then other themes started to come in, and on the left you see the piece with the carved orifice, which was it's got a sort of a sexual connotation, but to me it's like it's the portal, between the inner and the outer, the sort of whether it's psychological or physical. Although it actually came about from a cut that I got on the hand, and it reminded me of something else. But yeah, so the box, yes, my sculptures was other elements emerging, like the orifice, but I'd still retained the little wheels, so that element was still there, but obviously they were getting smaller. And I'm gonna flip around. These were since I think 2007. I started doing the RCA Secret postcards, which was to raise money for students at the Royal College of Art, and every year every year it's been on since 2007. I've contributed, but I tend to like to push the boundaries of what a postcard is. So a lot of mine were quite physical and quite sculptural. So here's a couple from 2 different years. The one on the left is based on an element of a drawing that I've done. I collect a lot of materials for my found object, for my sculptures, and I've done a drawing based on, I'd taken some of these objects, and in the drawing I've morphed them together, but I used a very technical drawing style similar to what I would have done back in the 80s when I was a technical illustrator for the Japanese company. And on the right here you see obviously the orifice emerging. This box had a mirror in, so when it was on display at the RCA, when you looked in, you just saw your eye looking back at you. And I'd started incorporating mirrors into some of my work, and I just quite like the playful element. And I'll show a little bit later. You'll see some other ones with mirrors, and I'll describe the sort of the playful side of that. The box, another motif or theme that emerged in my work was the nail encrusted wooden structure. First used this, it appeared on the city, the one that got destroyed, a little corner of it. But when I first moved to London, I was living in Forest Hill in southeast London. And I lived just around the corner from the Horniman Museum, which has got, I think, it was a Victorian tea magnate, Charles Horniman, and collected stuff from around the world. And when I went visiting there the first time, I became quite amazed by these beautiful, they're not sculptures because they're not really intended as artwork, but they're called Minkisi or Nikisi. They're sort of carved totems, from the Congo, and many of them are encrusted in nails. The concept, they were sort of like a spiritual tool, to even ward off evil, or for ceremonies, or maybe to wish well for marriages or whatever. And over time, I presume each village had like their own, and then the inhabitants would like hammer nails in, for different ceremonies, and eventually just get encrusted. And I love the fact, the idea of these power items, but with the Minkisi, their spiritual power is internal. There's like a pouch or whatever inside. But I quite like the idea, but reversing it slightly with me, I was collecting materials, nails mostly, rusty nails, and I like the idea that there's just by hammering them into an object, it's like a collective resonance from each individual item. And the piece on the left, nail box, you'll see actually it has scenes of mild peril. That's because it was used by a band called Scaramanga 6 for one of their albums, so doesn't really relate to the sculpture. But with this one, I made it over a 4-year period. So I spent 4 years collecting, rather than just taking raw shop bought nails and then rusting them. I felt that I had to find them or have people donate them to me. So I spent 4 years travelling around London, around Britain, even around the world, and I'd always bring rusty nails back with me, and some of them are from ancient sites. I even have this couple of nails from, I was working on a job inside the dome of St. Paul's Cathedral, and I found a couple of nails in a little passageway in there. So to me, it's the collective resonance of the nails that give it its power, even though it's kind of like you can anthropomorphizing here by imbuing it with something it probably doesn't have. But it's we're artists, whatever. As I mentioned, Scaramanga 6, they commissioned me to do the cover for the latest album, and as I'd mentioned earlier, with the one RCA Secret postcard that had the technical illustration style drawing of some of the found components. Again, you see it here. This is actually based on the original drawing where I morphed all those components and elements together. But here I did it as a more illustrative style. So I do still occasionally do a bit of illustration work. I like to dip between the two-dimensional and three-dimensional work, and so I kind of break from one by going to the other, and then you come back fresh. So again, this is but this is this is like the illustrative painterly version of that drawing that I did. I'm going to show a few just some of the exhibitions I've been in. I just thought, you end up with so many flyers from shows. So this one was for this is the Volts Gallery contacted me and asked if I'd be up for having a solo show there, so I did. And the title of the show, Dreams of Being Batman, is actually taken from this sculpture I made. It's a cast of my own head, but it was, I was at the time I was very into like childhood perceptions of adulthood and childhood heroes and toys. So I was looking back to sort of some of the comic book heroes I loved as a kid. So I wanted to do one of me as Batman, but like a dream version, so it didn't look like Batman. It just had the elongated ears, and it's white, and it's designed. There's an armature that you don't see from a certain position, so it looks like it's floating in midair. And actually this piece was I nearly lost my ears when I was casting this. It was so it was. But I think I was quite new to casting, and I hadn't quite used the appropriate molds. I nearly pulled my ears off trying to get them out. But the show, it was a mixture. It was like it was a show. It had like a lot of my drawings, prints, paintings, and sculptures. So it was quite diverse, and a lot of people thought it was a group show, but they didn't realize they were all by me. And here's another one for a show. A solo show I had at the Nancy Victor Gallery in Victoria. And I want to show this because I mentioned earlier that a lot of after the city, when I moved to London, a lot of my sculptures were getting smaller and smaller. And so I ended up with all these little box sculptures. So I decided to make a concerted effort to make a bigger sculpture. And I thought just a very blatant way was just to make another box and just put it on a tall framework. And I actually remember the thumbnail sketch. I was sitting in the Jewel Gallery, waiting for a speaker to come on, and I was thinking about this problem having these tiny little box sculptures, might make them big. And I thought, oh yeah, I'll just give them legs or make a frame. And I did a couple of thumbnail sketches really fast. And the one thumbnail sketch I went with for this was, virtually spot on. So it's like sometimes your working drawings are so close to what you end up, and other times very not. But again, here you can see the orifice element, which is quite a strong motifs in my work. But yes, this is a very blatant attempt at making bigger work. And here again you see Orifice Tower in the middle of, I was approached by a Faros gallery to create some work for a show. This the Cyclops pieces I made for this, they're called the Faros Cyclopses, because it was Faros guy who asked me to make them, and so I looked into Faros, and I quite like the idea of the myth of the Faros lighthouse and these powerful, this lighthouse. And I wanted to make something. I quite like the idea, you know, mixing the different mythologies and taking the Cyclops. So these two figures that I created were designed. They're made from found objects. The fingers are from old typewriters, which are so bloody well made. It took me about 2 weeks to disassemble them. But the idea with the Faros Cyclopses was that I initially wanted them to be in a window with no lights on, so at night they would sit, and it's kind of like a romantic thing that they would be illuminated by each other's gaze, because there was a light inside the box, and you know, they project on each other. And yeah, so that was like rather than I was just making it for somebody else rather than just going my own thing. But sometimes, you know, sort of someone asks you to do something and they'll take something unexpected and it will trigger an idea. Another one, it was quite an interesting show. It was a friend organised this. It was at the Slade Research Centre, and there was Anthony Gorman, who was in the show, and Storm Thorgerson, who did the Pink Floyd album covers, I think. But here's an idea of showing a working drawing, and it was just a rough idea, and I quite like the idea of these cardboard periscopes, but with lots of turns in, and I didn't really have an awful lot of time to get them ready for the show, so this first incarnation was a lot more minimal than the working drawing you see, but it was really popular because it's a periscope, when you look inside, it looks like you're just looking down a long tube, but obviously with them being bent with, like, you know, the light refracted or whatever. You can see a lot of people, you know, they come to this and they'd be laughing because they'd be looking down and they'd see their friend upside down, or they'd be looking at their own ear at the other end of this tube. So again, it's that sort of, you know, I was saying earlier about, you know, the use of mirrors and the playful aspect of the artwork. And this is something different. I am wanting to start combining some of my 2D and 3D work, and this is quite a blatant way of doing it, but this was a commission from a guy, James Dyer, who's collected quite a few pieces of my work, and it's quite unusual. And he said, "Oh, you know, I've got a guitar. You know, can I commission you to do something to it?" And I said, "Well, yeah, sure." And so I wanted to sort of, by taking a physical object, I wanted to go back to incorporating, well, a 2D element. I want to go back to a very graphic flat, but then try and make the flat look almost physical as well, but while still retaining quite a cartoon and graphic element. I did say to him that, you know, I've got to build up part of the sound hole so it won't be a usable guitar anymore, but I think he seemed quite happy with it. And yeah, it's nice to have something when someone throws something to you and you're like, okay, you know, you're forced to, you know, do something else. And the tentacle theme has sort of emerged through some of my work again. My childhood, I was going to like horror characters and, you know, crazy B movies. So I thought, I've been talking about sculpture mostly, so I'll just quickly go through some of my 2D work. This Spidey Pods is let's see how far. Yeah, Spidey Pods is it was just it was basically, I woke up one night and had a dream about these pods going off into the distance. I think it was after I'd been peeling the skins off segments of oranges, and I was quite fascinated with the pod, you know, the little tapered pod shapes that they're each made up of. So I just did this drawing, and the next morning I sort of squared it off, and then I thought I need to add something that's, you know, a covering for each pod. So I went with something from my childhood that I loved, which is the Spider-Man outfit. The paint was really popular. and so I had a screen print made of it. But yeah, since moving into sculpture, I found that when I do go back to 2D work, a lot of it had become very tight and graphic, as opposed to the more painterly stuff that I've been doing beforehand. As you can see here, the sort of playing with the graphic idea, the line, and the one ambassadors on the right. It's the line, the white line you see is actually the undercoat. These are like sort of box structures, very 7 centimeters deep. So I painted all the gloss or enamel of the flag with a tiny brush, but painting it really fast so I could paint it smoothly before it dried. But the good thing is that when you see this, because there's like a millimetre or two depth between the painted surface and the white undercoat, when you look at it, your eyes fluctuate very slightly. Again, I realised that I was going more graphic, so I was playing with the whole graphic thing. So I did a lot of series with graphic violence. This was based on some soccer hooligan thing from the newspaper. I did a sort of more sexual one. So so there's all to do with graphic lines, but also graphic imagery. This one, Sun Worshipper, I did a series of these. They were all based on very fast, quick thumbnail sketches, all done in a matter of seconds. It was when I went to the Tate Modern to see the weather project, where they had the mirrored ceilings. I was fascinated because people would go there and they'd just lie on their backs or in groups and they'd make patterns on the floor, looking at their own reflections. So I was doing lots of very fast drawings, but then I did a series, I think about 4 or 5 of these, and I took the ones that I really liked, and then just blew them up exactly. So as you get the thicker and thinner bits of line. So, but there is something about the very immediate drawings. What you lose in accuracy, you gain in a kind of sort of fluidity and kind of energy, I suppose. So I've just I do workshops. Here's one I did for it was through the Royal Society of Sculptors, because I got a bursary from them and was a member for a while, and I ended up doing quite a few shows and workshops through them. So this is why I did for ING Bank. But I've also recently done some for like schools, and I do ones for Great Ormond Street Children's Hospital and a few another hospital. So yeah, I quite enjoyed this. With this, I was doing they wanted somebody who could do an assemblage workshop, and so it was quite fun, especially people who not often find ones that are maybe the least creative naturally. With enough guidance, they can often come up with something pretty amazing. Ever since I was little, I always wanted lots of different, all forms of art really. But as a kid, I always wanted to be involved in films, in the film world, even making props or prosthetics or monster or whatever. But so I was quite chuffed when I was asked by Jakob to put if he could borrow some of my artwork for. He was doing a film called Scratch, set in the art world, East London. So we did a fake private view, and they had 4 of my sculptures in the show. Ironically, it was the space they used was a place called the Jargo, which was a sort of cafe gallery, and they had previously asked if they could have my big green man model kit for it, but because it was quite fragile, I didn't really want to lend it to them. And then when Jakob asked to borrow it, I said yeah, sure, and then realised it was at the same gallery that I'd turned down previously. And again, working in films, I was approached to do the sort of prop artwork for a horror movie called Blaze of Glory. It was supposed to be the work of a demented killer. And you can see in the background, some of them I had to go through. The research was a bit grisly. I had to do a few autopsy photos and stuff. but keeping with the sort of film aspect, this is sort of kind of like one thing that's always good to drop in the CV. It was Sony were running a script animation script competition, and basically they'd got John Malkovich to write the first part of the script, and then people had to submit the second part, and John Malkovich would choose the one he preferred, and he went with my doppelganger script. As it says, I'm going with doppelganger script. It's clever, inventive, and somehow both surprising and inevitable. Very neatly done, all in all. So thanks, John. But then I think it was a little bit dark. So for the next two people who were the one to follow from me and follow on from them, I think Sony took over and chose something a bit lighter. So it's a bit of a, as it's, it's almost like Exquisite Corpse, the script, which then got turned into, we didn't know it was going to be an animation originally, but it got turned into an animation. So it's always good to, as I say, it looks good on the CV. So you've written a script with John Malkovich and it's been turned into a film. Other sort of projects I occasionally get asked to do, contacted if I'll do stuff. This was Andy Martin Architects contacted me on behalf of there was a new ping pong restaurant chain being built near Wembley Stadium, and so they asked me to do the design. So I did the mural, you can see in the bottom right, and I designed the light box, and I also did the panels for the inside the toilets. It's one of these things where sort of I'd set time aside to do it, and then nothing. They didn't turn up with the materials until the last few days. So it was a bit of a rush job, but it came off quite well. Another project I was approached. It was Bria that were doing an installation at the V&A in 2017. It was part of the London Design Festival, where they had robots from heavy industry performing alongside dancers. So they contacted me, and they asked me to build the two stages for the dancers and for the robots to perform on, and also a screen for projection and other sort of sets and stuff. So it's one of those again sort of limited time, but it all came off in the end. And this is pretty much up to the moment. During lockdown, I was approached by because I moved out of London a few years ago. I'm now living in Shropshire, and I was approached by a local Shropshire artist who's a ceramicist about doing a collaborative project. And again, it's a bit like an Exquisite Corpse, where she will give me some clay figure or something, and I'll do something to it, give it back to her, and she'll fire it, or come back to me. So it's one of these. I've not really worked much on collaborations apart from one other, which I'll show in the next slide. But the whole thing about with collaborations, you have to sort of give over control, which can be hard at times. But the good thing is that whatever comes back, it's not quite what you expect, so it sort of throws you, puts you on the back foot, and it forces you to maybe deal in a different direction. So, but she contacted me ideally because there was an application for a quite prestigious event that she wanted us to do work on together, and we got selected. So it was supposed to be this year, but it's been put back a year. So unfortunately, I'm not allowed to say what it is, but it's very big. So we're really happy. But we also want this project to carry on beyond that and evolve. As I was saying, I'm talking about collaborations. My first collaboration was with the performance artist Callum F. Kerr. It was we arranged to meet. It was on the 7th of the 7th, 2005, which was the night of the London bombings, and so it was a very strange night. We met anyway, but the roads, the pubs were quiet. We we were sitting there and nothing to do with bonds, but we came up with this idea of a collaboration where, kind of based on those old Cold War spy movies where the two spies would meet on a bench and one would place a brown parcel or package, leave it between them. They all would take it and they wouldn't acknowledge each other. So we did this thing where we started, we would meet at the same set bench, always on a Saturday at midday in the same park. And with this, one of us would have made something, and you can see, put it down, and we videoed everything. So we still, this is like our secret project that went on for 9 years, and we've still not exhibited it yet. But it was really interesting because I put a piece down, he would take it, he'd come back a few weeks later, and we'd meet, and he'd made a piece, sort of inspired by that, and sometimes the pieces would be instructions or videos or some things we had to do, and it was quite interesting because I was very much a sculptor, drawer, and Callum very much a performance artist, and over the years we kind of, whatever things that we did, it started to influence. So some of the pieces, I was doing something a bit more performance based, and he'd do something more sculptural. But it's quite fun to look at, and I sort of see how we've aged over the years and the different seasons and the different fashion sense. Some of it very dubious, but there you go. So yeah, that's it really. I hope my internet didn't cut out and I'm still talking to you, but thank you very much.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, Wayne. I've got a few questions for you, if that's okay.
Yes, certainly.
First one is, obviously you work in such a range of mediums. How do you make decisions about which to use for each specific idea? Do you have, do you think you're kind of more led by process or concept, or do you have a preferred process?
It's really hard because I think, because I've been doing it so long, a lot of the time when I have an idea, I will, with a lot of it, if I have an idea for something, I will already know in my head what materials will work best and how I'll manipulate them and what medium it should be in. But then sometimes I try and, it's one of those things you work in such a way that you know what works, but that can actually hinder you. And sometimes I try and break the way that I work patterns. And I've done sculptures where I just make, rather than, I normally have an idea and I can almost see the whole in my head, the whole image, and I'll work towards it. Although often along the way, the material it'll give you like a wide section. You can go that way or that way, and it can dictate a different path, and you either stick with yours or go with that. But sometimes I have been trying to make some pieces that are, rather than working towards the whole, just making components and then seeing if I can fit them together at some later stage. But that does throw me a bit, so I can get used to that way of working. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, I think so. Brilliant. What's been a career highlight for you so far, obviously?
Career highlights. Well, the recent one the other month when the new museum in Riyadh asked if they could have Magnet for their permanent exhibition, for their permanent collection. So that's quite cool. Although I still think one of the early ones, when I was an illustrator, I remember the first time I ever had any of my artwork appear in a magazine. I could go into a shop and just take it off the shelves, because up until the moment I actually saw the magazine on the shelf, looked in it and saw my artwork, I thought it was all a joke that someone's having me on. And it's, even though it's like it's it's not fine art world, it's it's the illustration side. I think it's those early ones that that are quite a big step. But there's so many along the way that I'm probably forgetting like a really big one.
Thank you. And I guess to kind of lead on from that, Oh, we've got an echo. What's going on? Okay, is that better? What are your plans for the future? Do you have kind of blue sky ideas for projects you'd like to realise to kind of become your future career highlights potentially?
Yeah, I've got some new themes that there's some new pieces that I kind of want to do. Probably best not talk about until I've actually got a few of them ready made. But yeah, there's one of them is it's a piece that sort of utilises some of my sort of early loves. One of them's as a kid I used to love sewing. And I've got this one piece that's going to incorporate some natural elements and constructed hand sewn constructions. So I'm really looking forward to that. And there's also another piece that some of my tower structures have become more airy and more frame-like, and I've got some ideas how some of those could go. But the good thing about that is I'm hoping to pull in other artists and have, if not a collective, then artists, other sculptors with different styles of very different work, but with a way of unifying them into like a sort of hopefully a touring installation. So, but I don't tend to think about the next big thing. I just enjoy making things, and I stockpile. I'll have some projects that I just started years ago and they're almost finished, and I'll just put them aside, and then when I feel they're right, I'll finish them off, and because they'll tie in with something I'm doing at the moment. So I just love making things, and I always like having as many objects available for exhibiting. So
how has lockdown inspired you, or has it been a hindrance to your practice?
Since I moved out of London, the one thing I do miss is because I used to sort of spend about 4 or 5 days per month in London, so going to galleries and theatre and catch up with friends and parties and private views, whatever. So I haven't been able to do that for a year. So that's, Shropshire's lovely, but it's a bit of a cultural vacuum, compared to London, especially. But apart from that, not an awful lot. I've been going through phases, which I always do. I have like productive phases where I'm physically making things, but then I might have weeks or whatever where I'm not making much, but the idea is they're sort of gestating, and you've got to sort of try not to feel guilty because stuff's being made the whole time. I have this like weird thing, like I envisage this little dark creature at the back of my head that absorbs all the visuals and all the thoughts, and takes it all in, mulls it over, and then just throws nuggets at you, and you think, okay, thanks, I'll make that. So that's where the ideas come from. But yeah, so it's good. I mean, let's say with the lockdown project with Sharon Griffin, that's been really good because we've been, doing art. I made a whole new body of work that I wouldn't have done if probably hadn't been in lockdown. But yeah, little things here and there, and lots of ideas are coming through. So yeah, it's been good. Not an awful lot different to normal, to be honest.
Where do you source your materials from? And then this is a comment in the chat as well. You seem to collect a lot like Chris Burden.
I'm a total hoarder, which is like when I lived in London, I had people saying, because my flat and my studio, and I'm very good at compartmentalising. I can make a lot of things occupy a very tight, minimal amount of space. So but I had friends who said, like, you have to get rid of stuff. I said, no, I'll just move to a bigger place. So I left London, moved up here to Shropshire, bought a house, got a 3-bedroom house I use as a live workspace. But I collect stuff from everywhere, and a lot of the materials I got, I probably had for like 20 or 30 years that haven't been touched, and they're all boxed up ready. but also I used to work. I worked at the V&A for 15 years, and the V&A skips were amazing for the stuff that was thrown out. So yeah, as soon as it's thrown in, me and my friend and another artist, Andrew Campbell, he used a lot of band materials. We'd be fighting over stuff and dragging it back out to the office, and our bosses would hate that the office became full of stuff. But everywhere, I mean, I cycle everywhere, and if I see something that looks useful, and especially now that I spend a lot of time in the woods, because there's a lot of woods around here, and vines and stuff like that, I've always interested in. I've always incorporated them somewhere in some of my work. So I've been collecting a lot and drying them out. So they'll be making an appearance in some of my future sculptures.
I like the way that your work, but to me it seems to cross between different time periods. Like it's got the kind of steampunk, kind of slightly antique aesthetic, but also something that to me speaks of the future as well. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about your work in relationship to time.
Yeah, it is a weird thing. I have, I think I think with, most artists or creatives, it's always best to take your inspiration from outside of the field that you're currently working in. So a big influence for me was growing up, science fiction, apocalyptic stuff, horror. So there's like, sort of slightly camp, gothic, dark sense of humor to some of it. But also, as I mentioned earlier, the Brothers Quay were a really big influence growing up, and Jan Svankmajer as well. And that's why I think where I got my love of very old, tarnished things and broken things. There's I think with the Quay brothers, there's a lot of stuff relating to literature and fairy tale, and that's quite important to me. That whole fairy tale and kind of dream aesthetic. That I love. The dream thing. That kind of abstract thought process where things don't. They have a sense in their own reality, in their own realm. But when you try and articulate them, it's a bit like art. You can create something in art, and it makes sense as a piece of artwork. It might be, but if you try and explain it, it can often kill it in a way. It's the explanation, it falls dead. So, but yeah, I think my influences were a lot of comic book, TV, film, animation. So I think the sort of I think that's probably where that kind of aesthetic comes from, the dark humor.
Brilliant, thanks. Are you okay for a few more questions? I've still got a few more. I've got a few more, and we've got a few in the chat as well. We quite often ask the question about advice for emerging creatives because of the fact that Conscious Isolation was set up in the context of lockdown and trying to kind of help creatives who'd lost access to facilities, and obviously with the connection to the University of East London. So I kind of always ask this one. Do you have any advice for young creatives, and maybe specifically thinking about young creatives who might want to get into quite broad fields? Like you've obviously worked across a load of different disciplines and within sculpture, but also two-dimensional work and film and things. So yeah.
Yeah, like I said earlier, I think a really important thing. I think it's important to try and find your own voice, or create something that feels true to you. I know when most of my life I was, in my early life I was a 2-dimensional artist, drawing, painting, and I was reasonably good at that sort of thing. And especially when I was a technical illustrator, I spent 4 years just drawing and really honed my craft. But I found that it wasn't until I went to university, and printmaking I loved, because I think printmaking and sculpture sort of lead into each other. But when I finally let go and became a sculptor, it's like I finally found my true voice. I didn't have to pretend, or I didn't have to do a certain standard of work that I thought was expected of me, and I think finding something that's true to you, that and yeah, sort of not being afraid. But like I said earlier, sort of, I think taking influence from outside the area that you're pursuing, and also don't be frightened to to break a few rules, or to to slide from one medium to another. I think, and also, I mean, I use a lot of found materials, and pretty much partly because I wouldn't, also because most of the time they're free. It's like, and I think sometimes if you don't have the really precious high-end materials, and you're just forced to use what you can find around you, it's having those limitations that can actually force you to be very creative, and sort of, it's not you're cutting corners. You're sort of finding, you're creating new paths for yourself and for your work. So yeah, I think especially in sort of times of hardship financially, there's just look at materials around you, and sometimes by finding a material, think this can't be used as an art material. You think, okay, well, how could it be used as an art material? And there's just so many, it's like, and found materials, junk, rubbish. It's like, it's all around us. It's free. So yeah, I don't know if that's helpful or not.
No, that's great. Thank you. I've got 2 more questions. So again, in how I respond to your work is I find it really intriguing, and it's quite uncanny. And obviously you touched on how the public respond to your work, and you said when you were talking about the piece with the old books that they were kind of slightly horrified that you were using books in that way. I was just wondering if you could talk a bit more about how people respond to your work, and whether you kind of enjoy making people feel a little bit uncomfortable, or I don't know.
I do. I know I use a lot of materials that some people might find macabre or unsettling, or the uncanny. I think, I don't know, it's part of I had like quite a sort of dysfunctional childhood, and quite some dark periods. So I think as a kid I probably absorbed that darkness and sort of made it mine. And so to me, a lot of the things, I don't find them creepy. And although, I remember before I went off to uni, I was living in this big house with a lot of people, and I remember I had my own room, but my girlfriend was there, and I had a friend staying over, so he, I said, well, you come in my room, I'll just stay with my girlfriend for the night, and he came out, so I can't sleep there. It's like the bloody museum of the macabre. But I think I don't know, I find comfort in a lot of that kind of slightly unsettling. But I know the hair one freaks out quite a few people, and I remember when I was making it, I was sharing a studio with this guy who did, it was Alex, who did paintings, but they were like beautiful paintings, but they were, you'd find a corner of a room and the paintings would meet in the corner, and they were very geometric. So they had these kind of like optical illusions. So if you stood in a certain point and you moved, it looked like it was coming out at you. And he hated the hair. And when I was making it, because the glue that I was using with the hair, because it's basically, I made a wooden box and I coated it in his hair, but I used an awful lot of hair and glue. And the only way to get it off at the end of the day was just to do that. And eventually I ended up with loads of these little hairballs, which I just used to leave around, and they'd freak him out. And then one day I got in before him, and I worked out where he should stand to work out the optical illusion point of his painting, and I suspended one of these hairballs at nose height from invisible thread, and I just carried on the work, and I just heard this real high-pitched squeal. I turned around, and he hadn't seen it, but it just touched his nose. So, yeah, I do like to play with people, I suppose, a little bit.
Brilliant. And the last question I have is, how do you title your work? How do you choose your titles?
Yeah, I don't know. Sometimes I often have a working title, and I'll go with that. And but then often as I'm getting through, especially sculpture, as I get near the end or partway through, it's almost like the sculpture's informing me of where it's going or what it really means, and sometimes that'll trigger like a title. And I'm normally quite good at titles, I think, but I think it's a bit like, I was saying that creature that sits at the back of your head and then absorbs everything and just throws out the information, and sometimes the titles come out that way. So I think it's being, things are being mulled over and things come out. I try not to be too punny with them, but some of them are just very basic, like Book Tower. But yeah, I don't know really.
I'll come back on. Thank you, Wayne. That was it was such a great talk, and thank you for answering my many questions and questions in the chat. Brilliant. Thanks for giving us your time.
Thank you.
Thanks, and thank you everyone for attending tonight. And see you all again soon. Thanks, Wayne.
Yes. Bye bye. Bye bye.